Today we're tackling a topic that, although not always consciously, influences every aspect of our existence: desire. More specifically, how along with sexuality, it profoundly influences our subconscious. Have you ever thought about how your urges influence your decisions, your relationships, and even your life path? To what extent do your desires shape your self-image and the way you perceive your environment? We tend to think of concepts like love, passion, and attraction as purely natural, almost automatic, and biologically determined phenomena. But is that really all there is to it? Or is there a much more subtle and deeper level of our minds, hidden behind this visible veil? For Jung, one of the most important exponents of analytical psychology, sexuality was never simply a physical phenomenon. It is, above all, a symbolic language of the unconscious, a manifestation of archetypal forces with hidden meanings, unexpressed wounds and inner images that permeate us. It's a psychic energy that directly influences how we connect, feel, and even find meaning in life. And it's precisely this dimension we're going to explore here. Take a deep breath, because this conversation has nothing to do with the clichés we often hear about sex or desire. There is no room here for judgment or distinctions between good and bad, beautiful and ugly. It's about seeing this energy as something much greater that, properly understood, can be transformed into consciousness, freedom, creativity, and even spiritual fulfillment. Please take the opportunity to like this text. It will greatly contribute to making this reflection known to more people who want to see life from a new perspective. If you haven't already, sign up now. When we think of sexuality, we first think of the body, instinct, physical pleasure, or the biological function of reproduction. But from Jung's perspective, this is only a superficial idea. Although desire originates in the body, it takes on a much broader meaning from the perspective of the unconscious. In Jungian psychology, desire is considered an archetype, a universal symbolic structure, present in cultures, mythologies, and rituals throughout history. It functions as a kind of language of the unconscious, expressed through dreams, fantasies, a constant quest, and that often indecipherable inner turmoil. If this power is misinterpreted or repressed, it doesn't disappear. Rather, it becomes distorted and can manifest in destructive forms such as addictions, obsessions, compulsive patterns, and internal conflicts. But if consciously accepted, this energy can transform into something far greater than mere relief or fleeting pleasure. It can trigger creative processes, opening the way to understanding, emotional healing, and personal transformation. Desire is essentially a force of the soul, a vital impulse that frees us from paralysis, leading us toward new things, connections, and meaning. But it also inevitably forces us to confront our vulnerabilities, our limitations, and what we prefer to keep secret. According to Jung, what we call desire or sexuality originates from a broader psychic energy, libido. However, unlike Freud, who primarily associated libido with sexuality, Jung conceived of this energy as the life force itself, which can manifest in a variety of ways, whether through desire for another person, passion for a project, a spiritual quest, or a journey of self-discovery. And the most interesting thing is that this energy isn't fixed. It is dynamic, it moves, it changes in intensity and form. Denied or repressed, it does not dissolve, it hides. However, when we listen to it with presence and acceptance, it becomes part of our process of individuation. At this point, sexuality ceases to be a purely biological urge and becomes a powerful tool for personal development and the expansion of consciousness. Desire then not only pushes us outward in search of experiences and other people, it also invites us on an inner journey where we discover our still incomplete parts. In this process, desire ceases to be a burden or a prison and becomes a bridge. To deepen this understanding, it is important to address two key concepts of analytical psychology: the anima and the humus. These two archetypes represent the images of the feminine and masculine, respectively, present in our subconscious and are in no way linked to biological sex or social roles. Jung argued that every human being, male or female, carries within them a symbolic representation of their inner counterpart. In other words, in the masculine world, there is the anima, the image of inner femininity, And in the feminine world, there is the animus, which represents inner masculinity. These internal figures are archetypal structures that not only exist in our subconscious, but also profoundly shape our emotions, judgments, expectations, and even the way we experience our emotional relationships. Think about it with me. How many times have you felt attracted to someone when, rationally speaking, it didn't make much sense? Or how many times have you idealized someone to the point of believing you'd found the perfect partner, as if they were the embodiment of everything you'd ever been looking for? Most of the time, it has nothing to do with the other person, but rather an unconscious projection of your soul or your moods. In practice, you're not just connecting with the other person, but with an unrecognized part of yourself that manifests itself through fascination. It's as if the subconscious uses the other as a mirror, reflecting what has been forgotten or lies dormant within us. This is why Jung said that love is often, in reality, an encounter with one's own subconscious. And if we are not aware of this, we find ourselves in chaotic relationships, filled with idealization or disappointment, precisely because we seek to fill the other's gaps. In humans, the enemy represents the connection to the emotional world, intuition, and sensitivity. When this energy is integrated, a person accesses these qualities in a mature and balanced way. However, when it is repressed, it manifests as idealizations, such as the image of the perfect and unattainable woman, the inspiring muse who enchants but also wounds. In the feminine universe, the mind corresponds to the principle of reason, action, and internal structure. Properly developed, it provides clarity, stability, and direction. However, when unbalanced, it manifests as an extremely critical and rigid inner voice, or as the expectation of an idealized savior, which rarely corresponds to reality. These inner forces silently influence our decisions, our needs, and the patterns we reproduce in our relationships. This is why Jung invites us to stop looking outside for what we lack and instead embark on the path of integrating these two principles within ourselves. We must allow the inner feminine and masculine to communicate, collaborate, and balance each other, because ultimately, it is the encounter with ourselves that transforms our worldview and our relationships. From this emerges one of Jung's most provocative ideas. When we fall madly in love, it is often not the other person we are in love with. It is a part of ourselves that we project onto them. It may seem strange at first, but think about how many times you've met someone and felt such an intense connection, defying rational explanation, that you thought you'd found your soulmate. According to Jung, this is usually due to the anima or spirit at work. The unconscious is using the other as a vehicle to show you something you haven't yet recognized in yourself. And these projections aren't trivial mistakes or illusions. They play a fundamental role. The subconscious acts as a silent messenger, signaling that something hidden within you is ready to emerge and be integrated. When a man perceives a woman as the embodiment of the feminine, he is often actually seeking to reconnect with his own sensitivity, his ability to feel, imagine, and connect with forgotten emotions. So he abandons her, forgotten along the way. When a woman projects the image of a man onto her partner, she may not be looking for it externally, but within herself. Presence, stability, direction, not in the other but within herself. The problem is that if we don't perceive this unconscious movement, we begin to demand from the other what he never promised us. We create an idealized figure, projecting our deepest needs onto it, and frustration inevitably sets in. This is how the breakup occurs, the moment when the initial magic gives way to confusion. The love that seemed magical suddenly becomes a battleground between expectations and reality. How many times have you experienced stories that began as fairy tales and ended in distance, resentment, and exhaustion? According to Jung, this happens when the spell of projection begins to break. The perfect image we had constructed crumbles, giving way to a vision of the other as they really are, human, imperfect, and nuanced. And as painful as it may seem, this rupture is not a mistake but a necessary step. Jung argued that it is necessary to break away from projections, for only in this way can we grasp the true essence of our soul. As soon as this illusion dissipates, the possibility of true love emerges. A love based not on fantasies, but on the real presence of two complete beings journeying together. The other ceases to be a solution and becomes a companion. They cease to be a promise of fulfillment and become a traveling companion. At this point, desire separates from need and transforms into creative power. Sex begins to be experienced with a different consciousness. For Jung, the sexual act is not only physical, but a symbolic journey, an opening to the unknown within us. And those who agree to step through this portal will be able to access deeper levels of their being. This process is what Jung called individuation, wholeness, the integration of light and shadow, of what we reveal and what we hide. When the energy of desire is experienced clearly, it ceases to be a mere blind impulse and becomes a creative force. It inspires projects, gives meaning, and awakens latent emotions. What was once pain transforms into beauty. What seemed empty becomes connection. Chaos transforms into meaning. It is no coincidence that so many ancient cultures considered sex sacred, not for moral reasons, but because they recognized in it an energy of life, transformation, and rebirth. Jung revived this vision, recognizing that consciously connecting with our desire becomes a powerful tool for awakening. This is why he spoke of the archetype of the hero of desire, a hero who does not conquer bodies but finds himself, a hero who seeks understanding rather than control, who confronts his own impulses, confronts his shadow, and emerges from this immersion with an expanded consciousness, someone who learns to live their inner passion without letting it consume them. But it's not easy. We live in a society that sometimes overstimulates sex, sometimes demonizes it. At the heart of this conflict between trivialization and repression, desire becomes a commodity or a source of guilt. Jung proposed an alternative path, neither renunciation nor self-destruction, but integration. If we examine desire honestly, it can destroy or strengthen us, imprison or liberate us. The difference lies in the clarity and awareness with which you experience this energy. When you truly ask yourself what you're looking for behind every attraction, every impulse, every need, a freer, more conscious and, above all, more transformative sexuality begins to emerge. Desire then ceases to be a mere need and becomes a tool for fulfillment. But to achieve this, we must go through what many avoid, the encounter with our own shadow. Jung called the shadow the psychic realm into which we reject everything we cannot accept within ourselves, everything that has been repressed, hidden and stifled. We are often taught from a young age that wanting is bad, feeling is dangerous, and wishing is sinful, and so we repress. But repressing doesn't mean making something disappear. What is repressed in the subconscious doesn't disappear. It simply hides. And it comes back, masked by guilt, fear, shame, sabotaging relationships and behaviors we often can't even understand. As Jung said, what you don't realize controls you. What you illuminate transforms you. By beginning to confront the sexuality that lurks in the shadows, we gradually regain control of our life energy. This doesn't mean giving in to all our desires or acting out of control. Rather, it's about listening to our impulses, because desire speaks. It reveals wounds, flaws, and uncovers previously hidden parts of ourselves. In this immersion into the unconscious, we begin to understand that even the most confused and contradictory desires contain valuable clues about who we are and our true needs. By embracing this forgotten dimension of the psyche, a new freedom emerges. Not one that allows us to do whatever we want, but one that no longer requires us to submit to anything. The freedom to choose consciously, to love with presence, and to break cycles that once seemed eternal. When illuminated, the shadow isn't a villain, it's a portal. And when sexuality becomes part of this process, a new power emerges. A power hidden behind so much fear and oppression. It's like turning on the light in an abandoned basement. What you see is terrifying at first, but you soon realize that along with the monsters, precious parts of yourself are hidden. Talents, strengths, facets to rediscover. In the symbolic universe of the psyche, Jung observed that the feminine carries an extremely strong polarity. On one side there is the maternal figure, caring and loving, a source of security and affection. On the other hand, there is the free, wild, and intense woman who carries within her the fire of transformation. These two archetypes are not new inventions. They permeate history, persist in myths, religions, folk tales, and above all, in the unconscious of each of us. The mother represents acceptance and nurture, the supportive womb. However, if this strength is exaggerated, it can lead to dependence, suffocation, and self-denial in the service of others. The figure of the seductress, meanwhile, expresses vibrant desire, vitality, and the power to innovate and challenge the status quo. It represents intensity, risk, but also awakening. And this is precisely why this energy has been so repressed throughout history. It threatens order, provokes change, and challenges truths. Jung understood that these two expressions of the feminine exist in all of us, regardless of our gender. In men, they often appear as projected images. They seek a woman who combines warmth and passion, security and desire, and are disappointed to find that no one can occupy these two positions without falling apart. For women, this conflict is experienced internally. To be gentle or strong, to be loving or free, to be loved or desired. In reality, these forces are not enemies. They complement each other. When a woman recognizes her seductive side, she no longer needs to tone it down to be accepted. And when a man realizes that the maternal image he projects to his partner is actually a deficiency in himself, he understands that the affection he seeks can also come from within himself. These inner images shape our attachments, our decisions, our desires, and our frustrations. And as long as they remain unconscious, they continue to sabotage, confuse, and sow discord. But when they are brought into the light of consciousness, we begin to see much more clearly what we truly seek in others and, even more so, what needs to be awakened in ourselves. Ultimately, it is this interplay between support and provocation, between welcoming and challenging, that gives depth to femininity and reveals its transformative power. And as we've already mentioned, desire is not a passing spark or a problem that can be silenced. It is a symbolic language, a force that arises from the depths of the soul and can serve as a guide for those who wish to change. It is at this point that a fundamental figure in Jung's thought emerges, the hero of desire. But don't confuse him with the superficial character who collects conquests and seductions, as culture often dictates. For Jung, the true erotic hero is the one who has the courage to dive into his own inner chaos, who faces his desires, his contradictions, his wounds without running away, and who undertakes this journey not to lose himself, but to rediscover himself. This hero does not deny his feelings. Instead, he draws near, listens, understands, and knows that desire can enslave or liberate. It all depends on how we connect with it, for this energy contains our greatest needs, our unhealed suffering, and our forgotten hopes. In this confrontation, the hero begins to free himself, not because he has ceased to feel, but because he now understands what truly lies behind his emotions. You know, those endlessly repetitive patterns in relationships, those emotional obstacles that feel like movie reruns. Jung said this is precisely the call to the hero's journey, for what does not reach consciousness returns as destiny. The erotic hero learns that desire must not be denied, but transformed, channeled, and turned into a force for self-knowledge and growth. Transforming here does not mean suppressing everything, repressing everything, or forcibly spiritualizing everything. It's about harnessing that raw power, that inner fire, and directing it towards something that nourishes the soul, whether that's creation, expression, true connection, or what gives true meaning to existence. Here it's like learning to use fire not to burn, but to warm, illuminate, and generate life. And the most fascinating thing is understanding that this process, while deeply individual, spills over and reverberates into relationships and the world. For the deeper we go within, the more authentic we become in return, the more we connect with the truth. And when we become aware of our true desire, we stop seeing the other as a safety valve, an emotional crutch, or a reflection of our own absence. Ultimately, the true hero of our story is not the one who runs away from desire or tries to overcome it by force, but the one who has the courage to fully experience this energy, to contemplate it without filter, and to emerge from this abyss with clarity, maturity, and understanding. Once we have faced our own shadows, recognized the symbols that inhabit us, integrated the feminine in all its expressions, and rekindled the creative fire of the soul, it becomes impossible to view sexuality in the same way. It's clear that it's never just about desire or the body. Sexuality is above all a bridge, a link between the instinctive force that drives us and the call of the spirit that invites us to grow. It's the fine line that separates pure impulse from a deeper, higher meaning. For Jung, sexual desire is one of the most powerful expressions of the unconscious. However, this energy does not necessarily manifest on a physical level. When consciously accepted and channeled, it transforms into creative power, inspiration, and a connection with something beyond the ego. And this isn't a modern invention. In many ancient cultures, sexuality was seen as a ritual, a spiritual practice, a sacred encounter where two people united not only their bodies, but also their souls. It was a mutual reflection, an awakening of the most authentic, vibrant and essential part of each person. Unfortunately, this vision has been largely lost today. Today, sex is often reduced to a commodity, entertainment, or mere performance. Yet, despite all cultural efforts to distort it, the collective unconscious retains the memory of a much broader meaning. And when we stop viewing desire solely in terms of immediacy, guilt, or haste, we begin to realize that it goes far beyond mere physical pleasure. It reveals a deep hunger, a thirst for fulfillment. It's not about denying the body or instincts, but about living with this power until we reach the essential. Allowing the body to express itself, yes, but ensuring that this goes hand in hand with awareness, listening to the soul inner wisdom. When we live our sexuality consciously, our relationships change. And not just our emotional relationships, but our entire life takes on a different tone, a different note. The incessant quest for external fulfillment loses its power and is replaced by an inner creative movement, a sense of wholeness, of real presence. Jung affirmed that true fulfillment only occurs when we manage to integrate opposites within ourselves. And the realm of sexuality is perhaps one of the most powerful for this process, because it is precisely there that the great opposites meet: desire and fear, pleasure and pain, matter and spirit. In this complex yet profoundly transformative world, we learn to mature, to truly grow, to leave our illusions behind and face our true selves. Ultimately, desire has never been an end in itself. It has been and always will be a door. If you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Watch the other video on your screen. See you later.